And I have just started.
All right.
Randall, I'm so excited.
Woo! Hello, everybody. People are starting to show up. Wow, Dina, so nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you too. It's an honor. I start to see some names that I recognize. I love that.
Oh, good. Yeah. Let's see where people are coming from. All right, people, we opened the floodgates a little bit early so you can get settled in, and also let us know where you're coming from. We have a chat and we like to know where our audience is. So just quickly type in the chat where you're coming from and let us know. Okay, we got someone from Indiana. That's cool. Don't be shy, people. Let us know.
I see some people from Morocco, from Gainesville, from Fayetteville. Yay! Hi,
Arkansas, Akron. Oh yeah,
Riffi.
Florida, London. Okay, nice. All right, while we're joining, make sure to put where you're coming from in the chat. Got a few more minutes until we get started. This is Letterform Lectures Online Edition. Okay, hosted by Letterform Archive, which is the home of Type West, School of Type Design. And our speaker is Dina
Just a
Benbrahim.
San Francisco local.
Well, you know, that's exciting.
I know.
Right. Mallorca, Spain, Raleigh, North Carolina, Oslo. Okay, very cool. People, drop where you're coming from in the chat. We want to know. Mexico, DF. Okay, Mexico City, fun. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Panama City, Panama. As I am always so impressed with this global thing, you know.
I know.
Right? Okay, Montreal, Quebec. Whoa. Okay. Well, give one more minute before we get rolling. Casablanca. Ooh.
This is my
a
brother.
relative? It's coincidence that their name is Benbrahim. Oh yeah, France. Okay. Okay. Let's see. All right, 11:59. One more minute. Then we get serious. Hello. Oh, Lisa Mayon. Hi. Okay, also remember, people, if you want everybody to see your message, use that little pull down menu in the blue lozenge and say everyone, send chat to everyone. And that way everyone can see where you're coming from, not just me and Dina. All right, here we are. It's noon. Woo. So welcome everybody to Letterform Lectures Online Edition. My name is Grendel and I'm Education Director at Letterform Archive, which is the home of Type West, our School of Type Design. Let me share my screen with you. I got a few slides to show. Dina, can you see that? Just checking. Awesome. Okay, so we have an international audience today. As we noted, please type where you're coming from in the chat. And remember, if you have questions for our speaker, please put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them after the lecture. First, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to Skilla Zaccolini, my colleague at Letterform Archive, without whose work in the background this lecture series would not happen. So thank you, Skilla. Oh my God. Okay. Letterform Archive is the home of Type West, which is our year-long postgraduate certificate program in type design. Sorry, our application period for 2022 just closed, and soon we'll be welcoming a new group of type scholars on board. But if you didn't apply and now you're experiencing a bad case of type envy, no worries. We will be hosting a bunch of great workshops in 2022. They'll be online and in person next year. So keep an eye on our website or sign up for our newsletters or both to find out what's coming up. And you can always also check our website here at letarc.org/education to stay on top of the upcoming workshops and classes. Okay, people, we just broke the champagne bottle on our new space on Saturday with a celebratory party that coincides with our first major exhibition, Bauhaus Typography at 100. It is an incredible show that celebrates the best of the very influential Bauhaus school. And it features over 150 pieces from the archive's permanent collection. So if you missed the opening, no worries. You didn't get the champagne, but you can still see the exhibition, which is open through April 27th, 2022. And if you want to make a visit, our hours are Thursday and Friday from 3 to 8 p.m., Saturday from 11 to 3 p.m., and the general admission cost is $10, $5 for students, and it's free for archive members and for children under 12. And we're also hosting virtual curator tours for those of you in, for instance, Morocco, who can't come by in person. And we have a salon coming up as well. So here's some details on that. It's hosted by our very own Stephen Coles, and it's going to be on Thursday, December 2nd, 2021. Salons are free when they happen to the general public, but the recording is only available to our members. So you might want to consider joining now. We have one more lecture on the horizon before the end of the year, and that is why start a national design archive. Tune in on November 30th for a fascinating talk by Gabriel Bendersky Perez on the rich history of Uruguayan graphic design, as he explains what circumstances led him to found an Uruguayan National Design Archive. Okay, so to find out more about these and other events, to see past lecture videos, or just learn more about Letterform Archive and how to visit, go to letarc.org/events, and better yet, become a Letterform Archive member. Stay in the loop, get cool perks. To help keep great lectures like this one today going, go to letarc.org/join and become a member today. Okay, welcome to Letterform Lectures, Fall 2021 edition. Letterform lectures are co-presented by the Letterform Archive and SFPL Book Arts and Special Collections. Letterform Archive is a nonprofit institution housing over 75,000 works of graphic design history. We are dedicated to the art and the craft of the letterform. And we would like to thank Adobe for generously sponsoring the video recording of this lecture series. So as I mentioned, you can view all Letterform lectures online very soon after they happen. Just check our website, letterformarchive.org. Okay, let me introduce Professor and Scholar Dina Benbrahim, who will take us on a tour of the very letterforms of Morocco and clue us in on the social, cultural, political, and linguistic context from which they develop. Dina is an Arab, feminist, multidisciplinary creative, and she is currently an endowed assistant professor of graphic design at the University of Arkansas. Her research investigates design for visibility, for civic action, and for social justice for marginalized communities, enabling them to collectively reimagine an equitable future. So we usually ask our lecturers to tell us an unusual or interesting tale, as part of their introduction. And Dina told us this story. She and her partner were driving in Florida, and they found themselves in front of a lot of cows out of nowhere. Dina blurted out, "Wow, look, so many beefs." And her partner just started cracking up, and Dina had no idea why it was funny. She said that speaking 4 languages, as she does, makes her say the weirdest things. So a few days ago, she asked her partner if he could low them on because the grass was getting too tall. I mean, that sounds pretty normal, actually. Everyone says that kind of stuff, right? Okay, Dina said the comedian Gad El-Malek jokes that he doesn't know where he left his pills when he misspeaks, as though he had a stash of imaginary pronunciation and translation pills that he forgot to take in the morning. We can all relate to that. I need some of those myself. Anyways, Dina warned us that she might say something weird during this talk, so heads up. Okay, everybody, let's extend a very warm welcome to Dina Benbrahim.
Thank you so much, Grendel. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you're able to see this.
Can.
Perfect. Shukran jazilan, Grendel. Bienvenue à tous. J'espère que ça pose aucun problème qu'on fasse ça avec un mix de français. Je suis de Tamazight, je suis de Darija, je suis de l'Inglisa.
Dina.
Just kidding. We'll do this in English. Welcome all. It's so good to see so many beautiful names that I recognize, former students, current students, colleagues, friends. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome everybody. And thank you, Grendel, for inviting me to speak at Letterform Archive. It's like the most precious honor, to be honest, to be with you today. And thank you, Skilla, for all the work that you've done. Thank you so much. I've been dreaming about this day and I can't believe that we're already here. So for just a little bit of background, I was born and raised in Morocco. And a few years later, after some stops in Gainesville, Florida, Buffalo, New York, and New York City, I moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas with my little family. And not much has changed since I was 6 years old. Same bangs and same happy vibes. I'm just not building sandcastles in a swimsuit for a living. I'd like to open this talk with a quote from one of my favorite writers, Sara Ahmed, also one of my favorite books, to be honest, Living a Feminist Life. In it, she says, to live a feminist life is to make everything into something that is questionable. And I feel like feminism is a way of life that helped me read between the lines, because that's where I mostly existed, between the lines, kind of questioning every single thing that I've been told. And when I just started in the design world, I had a few recurrent questions like, why are we listening to the same song when there are endless others that would enrich our ears and hearts? And in other words, why are white men still holding too much space in design history? And I don't mean to discredit their work. Who am I to do so, right? But design has been, I don't know, it's like it has not been invented by white men, and way more people contributed to it before and after them. And actually, a dear friend of mine, Ali, who's in the audience today, shared a speech with me by Ursula Le Guin that really resonated. And in it, this is a quote where she actually expressed what I thought and said it way better than me in my previous slide. I don't want what men have. I'm glad to let them do the work and talk their talk, but I do not want and will not have them saying or thinking or telling us that theirs is the only fit work or speech for human beings. Let them not take our work, our words from us. And so if we follow Ursula Le Guin's empowering words, it means that we need to uncover all the narratives that are systematically excluded. So then where do we start? Anywhere, really. And to me, it meant going back to my roots with an open mind, researching in the 4 languages that I speak, accepting that some of the imagery will be in low resolution and you will see it, accepting that it was only found because someone thought about putting it in their social media because they inherited it from their great-grandmother. And I think part of investigating in erased worlds is really to hold into every single little nugget, hoping to illuminate some of the puzzle and do better. So growing up in Morocco meant growing up in a culture that rejected figuration. And so geometric and typographic expressions are everywhere in the visual language. And I can't possibly invite you to travel in places where you may not have been without mentioning Ibn Battuta. He was a Moroccan scholar and explorer who also happens to be one of the greatest medieval Arab travelers. But I will speak more deeply about him in a little bit. And he said, traveling, it offers you 100 roads to adventure and gives your heart wings. This is a good reminder that there are hundreds and thousands of other roads than, you know, the one paved by white men. And this moment that we will share together is not a guided tour by any means. However, it is a tiny little road trip in which I will share with you a few stories that have been left out from design history as we know it. And it's not neat and it's not polished because history is not. And it's often more about context than form. So I hope you will keep an open mind. We will begin our journey by experiencing a few manuscripts. Then we will look at some prints. Then later we will fly over Morocco. And finally, we'll end up indoors with meaningful design objects. Are we ready for this trip? Let's do it. I'd like to come back to Ibn Battuta. He was born into an Amazigh family in Tangier. The Amazigh are the indigenous people of North Africa. And in 1325, some say he was 19, some say he was 25 or 21. But one thing is sure is that he left his homeland for West Asia, which is commonly called the Middle East, starting with his Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca, before he actually ventured into over 40 modern day nations, often putting himself into crazy danger just to satisfy his wanderlust. And later he was buried in Tangier in this little monument that you can see in the right photo here. I want to have a short, tiny parenthesis on the term Middle East. It's a colonial and inaccurate term that was invented by the British Empire before World War I, when they mentally divided most of the world. And I hope you can use West Asia in case you were using the Middle East before to refer to this region. Hopefully Skilla will put a link in the chat that can talk a bit more about this. But coming back to Ibn Battuta, when he finally returned home after 29 years of traveling, he dictated his travels to Ibn Juzay, who is an Arab scholar from Andalus. And the writing of the text was actually commissioned by the Marinid ruler of the time, Abu Ayman Faris al-Mutawakkil. The text was actually completed in December 1357, and the definitive text appeared a few months later, and it had this huge title, A Gift for the Curious, concerning the wonders of cities and marvels of the traveling, which is simply referred to as Rihla, or the travels. And it basically documented his lifetime of travel and exploration, along with social, cultural, and political history of West Asia in the 14th century, which, you know, according to his description, covered about 70,000 miles. Insane. And it survived in a number of manuscripts, but hardly anyone noticed until the French actually found several of them in Algeria in the 19th century and translated the Rihla into French. This is written in Maghrebi script in brown ink, and some important words are highlighted in red ink. It has some brown Moroccan binding there, also having a little flap, which is kind of cute. For reference, the Maghrebi script is a visual commonality of the region. It is a direct iteration of the Kufic. It's written with a sharp and pointed pen, which produces a line of even thickness. It also produces angular and swirling characters, which you can see here. It originates actually at Al-Qarawiyyin in Fez, which is an intellectual center and university in Morocco around the 11th century. And just for funsies, I would like to show you this before we move on to our next manuscript. But on the famous world map, Catalan Atlas of 1375, it is thought that the figure at the bottom left of the camel is Ibn Battuta traveling to see the great Mali leader, Mansa Musa. Moving on, there is an important Jewish heritage in Morocco, as many settled there to escape religious persecution. And Moses bin Maimon was one of them. He's mostly known as Maimonides. He was a Jewish theologian, philosopher, and physician who fled Cordoba, Spain for the same reason before he moved. And then he moved, to Fez with his family, which is in Morocco. And this manuscript contains commentaries on the Mishnah by himself, on Seder Moed and Seder Nashim. And he made some handwritten corrections that we can see in the margins. His son also contributed to these, among other people. And the script here is using a semi-cursive form of Sephardic origin. Ultimately, it was standardized as the Rashi typeface. But it's mostly used for secondary religious texts like this one. And in the headlines, we can see the square script, which usually appears on more important religious biblical words following the Ashkenazi tradition. This is an incredibly rare 1800s manuscript in Tamazight. I was so lucky to find it. Tamazight is the language of the Amazigh, and this 22 by 18 centimeter bifolio is using Arabic characters to talk about magic. It also serves as a guide on how to find buried treasures. Visually, it is alternating between blue and brown ink to emphasize certain words, also in red. It also can emphasize certain sentences and punctuation by varying color. It feels so alive. I really love this blue, which most likely came from Portugal, which is from this plant called Chrysophora tinctoria, and it would make sense actually. One thing to know is that traditionally Tamazight was more found on rocks and wood than on manuscripts. It also has its own script, the Tifinagh. It can be found in Mali and Niger. Its origin is actually believed to be in Libya and could be as old as 400 BC. And in the Tuareg mythology, and I love this, its creation is attributed to a hero of civilization named Anigoran or Amameyan. And in the 20th century, the script has been modified and standardized to today's form with one grammar, which is called the Neo-Tifinagh. And linguistically, Tamazight belongs to the Amito-Semitic Afro-Asiatic group of languages, and about 40% of the population actually speak Tamazight and write it. Let's now take a look at some Qurans. FYI, these manuscripts are believed to be the written manifestation of the divine revelation transmitted in Arabic to the Prophet Muhammad, and the text was codified and standardized in the year 651 by order of Caliph Uthman bin Affan. So scribes had a really particular status, almost sacred in the Muslim world. And this 13th century pink Quran showcases a rectangular bifolio with 5 lines of text in bold Maghribi script with diacritical and vocalization marks in gold. They're outlined in brown, blue, and green. We have some verse numbers that are in gold spheres, and the sajada mark, which is a prostration mark that is shaped as a gold drop on the left. The repetitive use of gold kind of insinuate that this was made for a royal or a noble, and usually the surahs or chapters and verses of the Quran are actually repeated either from memory or directly from reading the book during daily prayers. So if this was used that way, this manuscript would have been really in bad shape. Another point that is interesting about this manuscript is that the pink paper makes it very original and unconventional. It's believed to come from the earliest paper mill in Spain, which is in the town of Javita. Another 13th century Quran here, it opens with this beautiful geometric and illuminated rosette, similar to Moroccan tiles. And I just want to say that these patterns cannot be successful without a highly complex grid, suggesting that the grid common to contrary belief or common belief, in the design world is not a Western invention. In the marginalia here, it shows that this Quran was addressed to Moroccan residents in the city of Medina, and the Maghribi script also conveys that this book was addressed to a Moroccan audience. Similar to the previous pink Quran, this is in a remarkable condition, and so it was meant to be a sacred object of its own. Another beautiful manuscript here, it's 22 by 17.5 centimeters, coming from the 15th century. It showcases 3 to 4 divisions of a Moroccan Quran, written also using the Maghribi script, having gold illuminations. There are a few diacritics that are additionally outlined in red. The use of green paper is again super original and unique, which sets this manuscript apart. One thing I've been thinking about is that it could be inspired by imperial Byzantine documents and manuscripts, since they had a purple dyed parchment, which were also calligraphed in gold and silver. This is a 19th century calligraphic Quran in Maghribi script, super exciting. It's by a doctor and herbalist, Muhammad ibn Qasim al-Qundusi. He was a Sufi who lived in Fas. He thought of calligraphy as a spiritual endeavor for him. And this Quran was commissioned by the royal family again. Al-Qundusi's calligraphy and composition are so expressive and like traditional calligraphy, and I just love how much contrast there is in the spread. It feels really alive, and it has also some special quality or extra special quality because it was believed that this Quran had some healing and protective power. Moving on with some prints. I'd love to share with you this map by Sharif al-Idrisi. It's a world map. It's circular and it was published in the year 1154. It's oriented with the south at the top. Most early Islamic world maps were oriented this way because many of the communities that first converted to Islam in the 7th and 8th centuries lived directly north of Mecca, leading them to think that actually the south was the right direction of prayer. And so in here, there is a metaphor taken directly from the Quran that speaks about having the sea and then fire surrounding the earth. But something that I find really curious and amazing is that the African continent is actually dominating this map, and Europe is very, very tiny in there. This is a treaty of peace and friendship between Morocco and the US, sealed by Mohammed III on the left and signed by Thomas Jefferson and John Adams on the right, also ratified by US Congress on July 18, 1787. Basically, the Moroccan Sultan, Mohammed III, included the United States in a list of countries to which Morocco's ports were open and basically safe to stop by. And the Arabic version is written using the Naskh script, which was a script with a simplified anatomy, rounder than the Maghribi script, meant for administrative and everyday scribal documents. Moving on, this is an 1896 stamp, which is another object that showcases the Jewish influence in Morocco. In fact, the first Moroccan stamps appeared in 1891 when post offices were privatized and mostly owned by the Moroccan Jewish community. And at that time, Moulay Abdelaziz IV, the Sultan of Morocco, was in power, and he stayed until 1908. The Star of David appears on multiple stamps and coins of that time period, which may confirm the rumors that he wanted to marry the daughter of the head of the Jewish community then. This stamp in particular was distributed by a private post office between the cities of Tétouan and Chefchaouen. And we can see that there are prominent typeset Latin characters, while Arabic is just really tiny, even in terms of hierarchy, and just handwritten, kind of like an afterthought, which is sad. And to put things in context, the Sultan worked very closely with European allies, always seeking strategic and political advice, which certainly influenced the French and Spanish occupation that followed. And I feel like this stamp summarizes in a very condensed way the dynamics of that time. And since we're talking about the Sultan, I would love to share with you these two Orientalist posters. One thing to know is that the first Orientalist posters can be traced as early as 1890s, and it started when the PLM railway company started expanding in Algeria and Tunisia right before the protectorate that lasted from 1912 until 1956. And because there was a development of transportation, there were a lot of ads that emerged encouraging tourism, and they used an Orientalist language to do so. And for the most part, they are so full of racist, sexist, and awful stereotypes, super colonial. The ad on the left actually promotes only on the surface a laundromat that uses the soap Savon La Coquille. It shows the main imperialist European powers whitewashing literally the Sultan of Morocco in a bucket that is smaller than his body, while playing on this racist insight or belief that darker skin is dirty. And this poster was published after the Treaty of Algeciras was signed on April 7th, 1906, which is the one that forced Morocco into the Franco-Spanish protectorate that followed. And you could read a bit more about this poster in an article I wrote for the wonderful archive design repository. I believe Mo is here. Hi, Mo. And on the right, the headline translates to the Pearl of Harems, a superfine soap with an oriental scent sold at M. Harems, for context, were a separate part of a household reserved for wives, concubines, and women servants, where they were actually enslaved and locked behind the gates of these harems. And you could read way more about this horrible concept in the Harems Within, Tales of a Moroccan Girlhood by Fatima Al-Mernisi. Really recommend it. But this soap advertisement is following a Victorian aesthetic, mixing several typographic treatments, colors, and textures. It is so colonial, reinforcing this huge imaginary of racist and sexist exoticism. You can see in the background that there is a palace, there is this wild vegetation, kind of to promote the sense of luxury even beyond the Oriental scent. It's also promoting cleanliness with white skin. We see a Moroccan woman with white skin wearing these traditional clothes, being super passive on a ton of pillows, and next to her is her enslaved Black woman who is using a leaf to keep her cool. Both seem pretty happy with their situation, which I honestly doubt. Moving on, we are in front of Hotel Excelsior. It was built between 1916 and 1918 at Rue de l'Horloge by Hippolyte Joseph de la Porte. It followed a neo-Moresque architectural style, which is again an exotic revival of an architectural style that was adopted by white men architects in the wake of the romanticized fascination of like anything that was Oriental. And these are 20th century lithographs and ads for the hotel. They follow the colors of Morocco, and they have an Art Deco influence, which, you know, in here in particular, they targeted European tourists to visit the hotel. These are posters and tickets advertising the bullfights at Plaza de Toros. It was built by the Spanish and inaugurated on August 27th, 1950 with a bullfight. It was divided into 3 parts. One was located in Tétouan, one in Tangier, in Hamad Mrabit, and then there was another one called Hamad Drawa, which I suppose is a neighborhood in Tangier. I would love if someone from the audience could confirm this. But the visual language here is still super iconic, and it's definitely following the influences of the time. However, on the top left, that little ticket is using psychedelic type, And it's dated May 12, 1935, which, knowing that the psychedelic movement officially began in the mid-60s, this is kind of a treasure conveying that, you know, the experimentation with Art Nouveau aesthetics leading to the psychedelic movement might have happened a way before. And so it makes this extra special. This is a box of Alu Maroc paper matches. It was manufactured in Casablanca during the Protectorate. Actually, the French and Moroccan company was the leader in the market of matches with its iconic lion box. Their goal was to dominate the market, and I think they did. Maybe that's why they, you know, have this lion as an illustration, dominating the land during sunrise, super dramatic, and having Alu Maroc typeset in the cap letters in red. The text on the right translates to something like, if you use Moroccan products, you will contribute to the economy of the country. And, you know, they certainly played with the pain point of the Protectorate, encouraging people to buy their product that way, which is a bit ironic since they had French leaders. This is a photo of women workers creating and assembling the matches in 1948 that I found in the book Il Defonso Fiero, La Aventura de un Emprendedor by Elena San Roman. If you speak Spanish, you could read more about this. But, you know, women's work have been systematically erased, and I can't help but wonder how they might have contributed to the design of this iconic box, and I could not find any information about it. Jumping in time, this is a monthly magazine that was published in Casablanca on cultural, social, economic issues, also political issues, and it really had a critical tone, and that was meant to challenge the mainstream and stereotypical narratives, using French as their main language of expression. And, you know, this is quite avant-garde. It's even risky at that time, since Les Années de Plomb started in 1963 and lasted until 1999. Les Années de Plomb translate to the years of lead, and there were years of political oppression against all opposition and activism that went against the monarchy. And this cover was published in July 1966, when military service was made compulsory for Moroccan men who were age 18 plus. So I suppose that's what the text is referring to. Visually, you can feel the modernist influence in here with the use of black, red, white, as well as type heavy and geometric composition. Now we are with Nesl Riwen, who are just an amazing, very engaged and political band that got together in the 70s during this context of the years of lead in Morocco. And in fact, they were arrested multiple times for their political views. It's incredible because they sang about absolutism, corruption, poverty, and class systems, among other topics. And to me, that was something that was impossible. And in their song, Subhanallah, Sifna Wala Shtwa, which translates to, oh God, why did our summer become a winter? They're saying, our spring became fall, justice wasn't done, our leaders are absolutists and corrupted. Tell those who didn't understand the days we're living in to understand them, to understand the meaning of these words. Wake up, let's listen to it.
Can't hear it, Dina. Is it playing on your? Yeah.
Let's redo it. let's focus now on the cover by Polydor. It actually set Tanfid, the hour of execution, cinema press book cover that was designed by Abdeslam Sharif in 1928. It juxtaposes in a similar way hand lettering and also photography. And I think it captures a little bit the Egyptian influence in the visual language in Morocco. I really love this visual. It's a 1976 newsletter by Association des Femmes Marocaines, which is a feminist organization that was created by Moroccan students in Brussels, Belgium, to fight for Moroccan women's rights and against their economic, social, and legal oppression. And for more context, after World War II, Europe was looking for cheap labor, of course, to rebuild the countries. And in 1974, Morocco and Belgium had an agreement to exchange labor. And so there was a huge wave of Moroccan men immigrating to Belgium, which led some women to leave. And you know, that's kind of natural. And the government actually did not foresee this happening. So they just had no rights and they were living in terrible conditions. And in this context, this association, this organization actually was born, and it was led by Rachida Al-Idrissi Al-Yaqoubi. And you know, it's a very raw and straightforward cover, but there is a clear sense of hierarchy. And the newsletter is typeset with a type letter. And I think it's a very common visual language of feminist publications then. Now, when AIDS began killing and infecting hundreds and thousands of people around the world in the 1970s, there were a lot of printed posters that were used to spread persuasive information on the topic. And it was, you know, relatively an affordable media that could reach any place. And every culture visualized their message in a way that could be acceptable in their society, sometimes despite cultural barriers, and sometimes the effectiveness of spreading that message was not about having perfect typography. And the headline here says, tradition does not rhyme with prevention. We can see some henna on the hands. It's, you know, it produces temporary tattoos, and they're mostly done on hands and feet. They're thought to actually bring good luck, which we call fel. And this is a tradition in weddings or also during Eids. Here, it definitely refers to sex after marriage, since it is a crime before marriage until today. And remember this emoji? So it definitely shows that how the hands are carrying the condom, that, you know, you'll just be okay with a condom, which I think is actually pretty clever visual. Next, we have a print by Malika Agznei. She's the first modernist of Morocco. She studied at the Casablanca School, which was a mini school of the Bahas. She was part of the first artistes contestataires, translating to protest artists, which is how the first students of the school were referred to, since they completely rejected that Moroccan art should only be picturesque or naive, like the protectorate wanted. And so the school was organized independently from the Ministry of Culture and the state's official art. So they weren't following their policies. They could challenge actually these rules. And Malika Agznei, her works feature like multiple intricate interweaving and overlapping organic forms, which she calls algae, seaweed. And this print is actually a calligraphic abstract piece. It's really full of movement. The actual negative space reveals the letter forms, and yet it remains legible to follow her original aesthetic. And I can't help but connect both the expressive calligraphy of Al-Kandusi and hers, even wondering if this was an inspiration in any way with the aim to push the letter forms into even more expressive territories. Continuing with the School of Casablanca, on several occasions, they organized some field trips to visit historical sites, to learn about traditional, urban, rural architecture, to learn about art, design, visual crafts in the country in general. And it's in this inquisitive context that Maghreb Art was created. It actually included the study of the Bahas alongside general historical notions for the very first time, but it also turned to non-European works focusing on the Maghreb and Africa, which up until then was hardly even considered in the canon. And I guess we could say that the 1960s in Morocco were our start of the effort that we now call decolonizing design. For reference, the object at the center of this modernist cover is used to shape bread before baking. It can also be used as a basket. And I think it brings really so much movement to this geometric and minimal compositions, almost like it's rotating. Now, I'd love to show you these 1980s covers of a publication by the Collectif Berber Rabat. It focuses on Amazigh history and culture, which is truly revolutionary for the context of that time. There is an important point in history about Tifinagh, and it's that essentially this is an ancient written and ancient writing system with a unified structure, and it only became a recognized language by the constitution in Morocco on March 9th, 2011, which is after February 20th protest that rose along the Arab Spring. And, you know, the survival of Tamazight for more than 3,000 years, outliving not only powerful cultures and civilizations, but also powers to not recognize it, was largely thanks to women's agency in preserving and transmitting it. And you could read more about this particular topic in the book, Moroccan Feminist Discourses by Fatima Sadiki. And for more context, after the end of the protectorate in 1956, the Arabization got established around the 1960s as an effort to decolonize the country. But Amazigh in here and even our Moroccan Darija became a collateral damage. And this not only hurt our people, the legitimacy of our culture, but also the collection of works that we could have had today. And in the case of Moroccan Darija, that, you know, has been heavily influenced by the Amazigh languages, and to a lesser extent by Latin, Punic, French, and Spanish. It's the most spoken language of Moroccans, and yet it's not being institutionalized as an official written language because of our colonial past, geopolitical hegemonies, and social fractures. Moving on, this is the Nightingale magazine, and you can see the bird visualized in their logo. It's a cultural magazine for kids that was first published in 1975. It has chapters on Islamic education, Moroccan history, math, biology, and whatnot. And it was distributed in public and private schools with the goal to promote a certain ideology, some Moroccan values, and some roles, like gender roles. And it started as an A4 black and white magazine, then slowly incorporated more colors. And it's mostly in Arabic, sometimes in French. The identity is really not strict, like every publication gets a main color and there are some constants, but it's mixing hand lettering and typeset Arabic, it's juxtaposing photography and illustration that is usually contained within this rectangular shape with the border, which refers to the zélige or a mosaic piece. Sometimes it's more abstract. And its publication actually stopped in 2007, and it came back in 2015 with some Tifinagh, also without any intentionality in the identity. These are two color inside pages of a 1982 copy, mixing hand-lettered script and typeset Arabic using hand-drawn illustrations and a decorative frame that contains everything. And the body copy has some vowels, which are the diacritics that you're seeing here. And they're systematically printed when kids are learning to read so that they know what sound to make. We will end this section with this new wavy tape cover that is mixing typeset and lettering. It's also juxtaposing bright pop colors and a dominating photo of the queen of the Aita, Hajja Hindawiya. She's standing tall, she's not looking at her audience, and she's just doing her thing. And, you know, she's this avant-garde feminist icon. She's one of the first women to play in theaters in Morocco in the 1950s, when it was just simply socially unacceptable. And her songs just talked freely about sex, about love, about alcohol, decolonization from the French, which, by the way, led her to jail for a few days. So she had to leave Morocco and come back after it was independent. But you know, in fact, she was so committed politically. She helped those who fought for the independence to hide their weapons. And besides that, she definitely modernized the Sha'bi, which is the musical genre she contributed to. Let's hear one of her most popular songs in this tape. All right, let's now travel in the streets of Morocco. Tangier, it was legally designated as an international city until the 1956 something, because various ethnicities and cultures, religions and languages coexisted. And here we are in front of the Gran Teatro Cervantes. It was built in 1913 by Esperanza Orellana, Manuel Peña, and Antonio Gallego. Really love these blue characters and multicolored ornaments spelling Gran Teatro Cervantes. The letter forms of the theater noticeably follow the aesthetic of the arts and craft movement, which advocated for a keen attention to detail and, you know, refined hand craftsmanship in opposition to what they believed was a dehumanizing industrialization. And I think Cervantes' sign is certainly an iconic historical piece that reflects these values. I also went to school a block from the Cinema Roxy. It's this historic neon sign that is on top of the building. It has been there since 1895. It's pretty classic in terms of letter forms, just having some serifs there. And although the Y looks like a lowercase revamped as an uppercase, maybe with the intention to create a diamond shape in the negative space. But the sign has just a simple balanced hierarchy and a cute little star on top. And you know, we didn't have a lot of neon signs, so it makes it extra special. Now we are in Perdicaris Park, which is a forested park on the outskirts of Tangier. Ion Perdicaris was a moneyed expat who resided in Tangier and built a villa and a couple of other structures in the early 1900s. And he abandoned his property in Morocco in the 1930s. And right after the independence of 1956, his land became the Perdicaris Public Park. The sign above was the one I remember from my childhood, and the one below is the one that you can find today, which became a way more inclusive by integrating Tifinagh. When you drive in Morocco, you can see in multiple cities, and when you enter them, the Sharifian pillars, Allah al-Watan al-Malik, God the nation and the king, which appears in various landscapes. Again, these words close the national anthem, and they kind of want us to be all unified with these words. And if anything, they really are engraved in our minds. In this case, the letter forms are shaped using a Kufic script, and they're visible from the borders of Morocco as a patriotic statement. And an interesting historical fact is that in the 1930s, the nationalist movement in Egypt was fighting against Britain for their independence. And the slogan at that time was God, country, and king. And some Moroccan nationalists were in Egypt at that time, like Lel Fassi, and it's believed that this is at the origin of the Moroccan motto, which, by the way, is shared by Jordan as well. Moving on, and let's travel in time a little bit more. This is a solar clock at Taraweeh in Fes, which is one of the oldest universities in the world. And it was founded as a mosque by Fatima al-Fihri in 859, and then it became one of the leading spiritual and educational centers of the historic Muslim world from Fez, Morocco. And in here we have what surrounds the clock, some sacred scriptures using carved Toulouse script, and a little piece of metal that conveys the time with the shadow that the sun makes. And it looks like it's a mix of stone and marble. And I think this is really fascinating. Now, this is a 14th, 15th century epigraphic phrase that translates to what excellent companions are happiness and good fortune. It seems that the frieze is made of tile mosaic on an upper wall, carved stucco. It is constituted of 4 panels, which is coated in a purple or black glaze. And basically, the Toulouse calligraphy is carved away on a background of foliate scrolls. This is a very common technique in Morocco, but it's also very time-consuming and meticulous. We are now, again, traveling in time and space. We're in front of the main post office in downtown Casablanca, and it was designed by Adrien Laforgue in a neo-Moresque style. This post office actually was constructed from 1918 to 1920 when Morocco was under the French protectorate. And the blue tiles with the ornate, floral, and geometric patterns are very much characteristic of Islamic architecture. But again, it is exoticized, right? And we also see some yellow Art Deco cap letters there to contrast with this, which again feels a bit expected. This is an original sketch by the architect before it was built. You know, type in Morocco is really timeless, and from one city to another and one street to another, different time periods, movements, and cultures, also influences are coexisting at all times. The complexity of meanings is certainly challenged by the prevalence of oral history. And although I hope that sharing some of these pieces can complete a bigger picture. Special thanks here to Lucas Peters and Amin Al-Hababi for providing some of these photos. Let's move on with our last and final section, looking at design objects for indoor spaces. This is a couscous plate highlighting the verse number 38 and surah number 36 of the Quran, following an Asafi style. It's very, very rare to find calligraphic pieces on everyday life objects because they would be considered as anti-religious. But I thought it was really worth including in this presentation. This is a piece that was found in the Museum of Moroccan Judaism. This museum was created in 1997 in Casablanca, and it's the only one actually in the Islamic world to focus on Jewish culture. And we can find several objects of everyday life in it, including this one. I've asked a friend to translate what it means, and that friend said that, you know, there are words that mean fruit, cows, to save or with blessing. So my guess is this was used to preserve food, or food was served in it. I'd like now to talk specifically about the symbolism that is prevalent in Amazigh female expression and that carries the legacy of women leaders and deities. Symbols are reproducing everyday life objects, including carpets, which I will focus on. And I really believe we can't overlook this powerful form of communication and feminine resistance tool that is not based on any male values. And I believe if we consider ornaments as part of typebooks, then this deserves to be included too, knowing that it has its own purposeful language of communication. I would love to recognize the important role of Amazigh women as agents of change in their communities since ancient pre-Islamic eras until now. They really have helped preserving the Tamazight language and Amazigh culture. They also have, and they had powerful roles in spiritual, political, and military leadership within such a rigid, patriarchal, and colonized society. And history tried to erase Amazigh goddesses like Tanit, or priestesses like Kabdat, or women warriors like Kahina, but they did not succeed. In fact, women in Amazigh culture are so important that the word for woman in Tamazight is Tamgad, and it literally translates to community leader. So the triangle is the body of the goddess Tanit, the goddess of fertility. And from there, we have derivatives. So we see the symbol of the vulva, of having legs spread out, of being ready to have sex, of giving birth, a symbol of a woman also having sex. Wondering if one of those was to refer to same-sex relationships. And also some symbols about breast or prosperity. They both equate each other in the meaning. I want to show you this carpet because it has a huge losange or diamond shade that is dominating the entire surface, which signifies women. And maybe this is just a joke for myself, but it was probably a Beyonce statement, who runs the world, girls before Beyonce. And it was actually made in plains around Marrakesh. This carpet has an abstract cubist design, which coincides with European design at that time. Yet the influence could not have been available there because of how remote these regions are. And from the symbols that we've seen previously, this carpet speaks about having a ton of sex, experiencing orgasms, being fertile, getting pregnant, and possibly having contractions when it becomes pixelated. This is a 20th century snippet of a carpet that shows 9 colors representing the diversity of vulvas. And I mean, I just did not have to wait until the show Sex Education was on Netflix to learn about this, which I think is so empowering in a society where sex is an extreme taboo, especially women's vaginas. And finally, I will end with the powerful carpet with more vulvas and the clitoris from the Middle Atlas that we can see here. This was our humble walk together, and this research is really just the beginning. It's a seed. I learned recently that to be able to take a picture of a black hole, we need a telescope of the size of the Earth, which is obviously impossible. But that picture can be pieced together if multiple telescopes in various locations in the world snap the picture at the same time. And that's exactly the collective effort we need to enrich the puzzle of design history. I think we need everybody, designers, educators, historians, students, translators, curious people to contribute to this radical effort. And I'm not a historian, and all I'm doing is trying to connect the dots using the 4 languages that I speak and my experience as a Moroccan woman who was raised in a Muslim family and grew up in a post-colonial patriarchal society. I think only with this kind of collective effort, we could actually have an honest portrayal of design. And I mean a constellation of stories, you know, that would be free from a cultural genocide that is laid by the belief that design only happened in Europe during the industrialization. And I think we're all still learning and unlearning. So it's fine, you know, it's an entire process, but it is necessary to design better. And I would like to end by quoting Sarah Ahmed again. She says, those of us who arrive in an academy that was not shaped by or for us bring knowledges as well as worlds that otherwise would not be here. And I believe that my intersections constitute one of these worlds that can contextualize a few works that have been excluded from the canon. And I don't feel represented in our design canon as it is. And to those who don't feel represented also, I hope you know that you have the power to bring knowledges that are not in this canon yet, but deserve to be included, because we sound much louder when we're together. I'm honestly really, really inspired to see more and more efforts to expand the design canon when new books, podcasts, online courses, Instagram pages, websites, and so on just emerge in this world with a plural perspective. And I'm really optimistic that design histories can be taught and studied following 1,000 roads. So let's pause now on this lecture with a kind invitation to reflect and chat. In what ways did graphic design history reflect or exclude your world? And how will you contribute to questioning history, welcoming excluded narratives, and expanding the design canon? Thank you so much.
Bravo, bravo, Dina. That was fantastic. Woo! Okay, people, we need some questions for Dina here. Please drop them in the Q&A. There is one question, but I'm going to preempt it with a question of my own, which is some of the songs that you played sounded like they were super cool, but we couldn't really hear them that well.
No.
They kind of flakily came through, and it may be because they were old recordings, but it also probably was Zoom. So if you could post maybe in the chat links to where people could access those songs, or, you know,
I'll do that.
Here, that'd be awesome. Okay, thank you. And you're getting a lot of bravos from people in the chat, I see. So we have one question. Folks, we can take about 15 minutes for questions, so let's have them. Let's hit Dina with some good questions. So Victoria Gerson asks, how do you find these artifacts? Please tell us about your research process.
That's a very good question. I research in 4 languages. And so that gives me the advantage to be able to just access more materials. But at the same time, I think sometimes I just play Google Translate and try to understand things. So I think it is feasible by everybody. I also keep a really open mind, because a lot of the erased design works are found in like Facebook pages or, you know, places that are not traditionally academic. And I think it's important to understand that what was written in the past often was written by white men, and they actually narrated, you know, the narratives that we have today. And so if they're not included in an academic reference, it doesn't make them any less valuable. And so I try to keep that in mind. And I think it's really hard actually to find all these things. And it's just really trying deep Google and deep translations and deep just finding books and trying, asking people.
Okay, so you just, it sounds like access to multiple language systems was actually pretty helpful, you know, because I feel like that definitely sometimes you hit a wall if you're just using English only.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hustle, I'll say it. I I wish I found more works on women's work. It's like, I wish this presentation was all centered on women's works, to be honest, like Moroccan women designers. But I have still yet to maybe just travel to Morocco and go ask more people. I think it's hard, like research is just hard.
Yeah, I know. I guess you have to, how long has it been since you've been to Morocco?
Since 2017.
Yeah, right. Well, that's, it's not since you were a kid, you go back.
No.
Yeah. So maybe that could be your next presentation, right? Just centered on Moroccan women designers. Go back, spend a month or two, do some solid research. Yeah. Okay, do we have any more questions for Dina here? Somebody's put some question in the chat here. Let me just pull that up. If you drop your question in the Q&A, then I can type the answer in. So that's why it's a helpful thing to do. Oh, I think this is Avery Hart says, those rugs were so enriched with culture and tell such important stories. It makes Avery think of how Western appropriation misconstrues the symbols as just a style, or how stores such as Home Goods might be selling rugs, telling stories about sex, and people not being aware of that fact. Okay, that wasn't really a question, but it was interesting statement. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think even in Morocco, people don't know what they really mean, to be honest, unless you're part of that culture, unless you've done the research. And I think it's still a part of being powerful because they try to erase women leaders, and because they try to erase women's works, and it's still living there and it's still out there. And it's, in fact, almost in every Moroccan home. You know what I mean? It's powerful because of that.
So was that, I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. Was that a matriarchal society, or how did it come to be that these topics were so discussed and above board in a society that has now maybe turned more patriarchal and more repressive in terms of women's rights and sexual rights?
I think the role in Amazigh society, the role of women was incredible. And I think just recognizing how feminist it is to actually talk about these topics in a society that has been colonized by the Romans, then the Arabs, and tried to oppress their voice and their language and culture, but it didn't work. I think that's what makes it the most powerful. So they have been leading their societies, they have been leading their culture, they have been preserving their culture from the very beginning. And so it wasn't a matriarchal society, but they were definitely like, some of them were warriors, some of them were political leaders. They had a real role in society. It wasn't just staying at home.
Right. What did you say the word for women literally translated to? I loved that.
Tamazight.
And it meant something important, like a spokesperson or something like that?
It meant community leader. That's in the language. If it translates to woman, so it's like if the etymology of woman in English was community leader.
Oh,
love it.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question here from Petrusnik. Sorry, Petrusnik, if I mispronounced your name. Petrusnik asks, where can one find more resources on the manuscripts? Are there online archives?
So I found some of these at the Met since they published them online, but some of them I found in auction websites, when they were trying to sell them because they didn't recognize how important they were. Some of them actually more just, there's a ton of archives for manuscript. Maybe you're more, yes, the Library of Congress was also one of them. I'm just saying, like, it can be as official as the Library of Congress and as unofficial as an auction website, you know, and I think I found the most incredible ones in unofficial websites. And I think it's about going beyond what is already available in these archives.
Okay. But there's no like that Letterform archive, for instance, of Morocco at this point, right?
No, but there are like a few archives, like what Mo is putting in the chat. There is also Bibliothèque Nationale du Maroc, so it's the National Library of Morocco. I found some also at Lima. It's the Institute of Muslim Worlds in Paris. I've also bought a few books on Morocco that were displaying some of these manuscripts, but yeah, there isn't one place. There are just, everything is spread out in multiple things.
Okay, fantastic. Do we have any other questions for Dina before we sign off, or should Dina and I just chit chat? Come on, bring on a question. Surely something must have come up. I think one thing, Dina, I'm looking forward to seeing your slides again, because the street images, that stuff I found really interesting. We didn't linger long enough and get an explanation of some of those like sign painting styles, etc. Can you elaborate on any of that? Are you aware of any like sign painting traditions or anything along those lines?
I feel like I could have made a presentation just on that, and I could have made, like, you know, it's like I tried to just put a bit of this and that, and actually my point was to showcase the diversity of culture that were coexisting together. But there were multiple styles. Some were handcrafted, you know, like very, I can reshare, in fact. You're like, yes, yes.
So let's see those again, because they were super cool. Yeah, like a walking tour of the signs. When you go back to do your research, maybe you can hold one of those and take us all. Yes, I love that. That one in the upper left, with the tiles is just stunning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in fact it plays off the idea that actually the Kufic, some of it was invented to actually fit in buildings and mostly for architectural purposes. And so here we have it, we see it, it's so geometric and it's so sharp that it actually just follows, you know, this idea of like putting type in buildings using ceramics or zilij. So this is where actually this is coming from. But I actually really love the one on the bottom right, where things are just hand painted, like very casually, almost dramatic, you know, with the dentist. There's some humor in there, which I very much appreciate.
Is that actually an ad for a dentist? It looks like a dentist I would want to avoid, frankly.
It's actually a plate that you would find at like the entrance of the dentist office, or like outside, to actually say there's a dentist here, you know. And they're very, very common in Morocco, these funky signs of showing someone getting a tooth being pulled.
Somebody in the chat, it's Guy Menga, says, I'm pretty sure the mechanic and the dentist share the same tools.
Yes.
Good observation, Guy. And then one more question about the one in the upper left. It looks like I'm seeing a combination actually of both. It looks like Arabic and you know, Latin letter forms, right? Roman letter forms. Is that true, or am I
the one in where?
The tiled one that has both the same, does it have
Yes,
Yeah.
it has Latin and Kufic script.
Oh,
Both.
it's cool. Oh, it's the Kufic Arabic.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. The way they integrated them, I have to say.
But it's also like not very traditional, like how the letters Zain is and the Ta, the last letter is to, like, it's not very common to see them written that way actually in Kufic script. It's like it's mixing.
Yeah, well, the Latin isn't, I mean, the Roman alphabet isn't very traditional either in some
Yes.
parts.
Yeah.
So they kind of had to stretch them both or push boundaries.
For
Oh, we have
sure.
another question, which is a bummer because I wanted to see all the other street signs, but maybe we can come back to those in a second. Elizabeth Gabriel asks, hi, Dina, how has your small archive begun to inform the ways that you design and inform the ways you teach design? This has been so inspiring. Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for your question. That's a very good question. I'm actually teaching design history next semester, and I decided to only spend 1 week on European movements, which is very and highly ambitious, and I would rather like spend time with topics and talk about context and spend time with just looking at different works from all around the world in their context. Another thing is I would love to involve students in researching as well, and empowering their voice by researching topics that are overlooked in design history, hopefully topics that are or that would actually be meaningful to them where they grew up or where they know somebody from there, or they have some kind of tie to it, and kind of ask them to look at things with such an open mind and not limit themselves to academic references and go beyond it, and maybe even like produce a podcast on it instead of writing essays, to even like make it easier to make design history works that were overlooked more accessible to all. And the way it involved it informed my own design. Well, I think speaking multiple languages and coming from my background, I'm definitely just open to bilingual design, or just more languages integrated in my own work. But I definitely follow a feminist approach to everything that I'm doing. And I think that's the common point between every single piece in my work.
Okay, awesome. And we have a question from Daniel Cullinan.
That I just answered.
You just answered it. Okay, wow.
It's Tifinab.
Wow, that's what I thought I remembered that from your talk.
Yes.
And I feel like we had a talk at Letterform Archive not too long ago by some people who were making a digital version of Tifinag, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Which seems something that could be used on people's mobile devices, etc., not just something abstract, but something that would really cement it in daily usage, which would be super cool.
Yeah, I mean, especially that there wasn't enough focus on the script until today, and I think it really needs some variety to just allow for more expression and to allow for more communication possibilities.
Oh, okay, you put up another slide here. This is awesome. Is that okay? The combination of scripts is really interesting. It seems like sometimes they try to create some similarities, and sometimes they just don't even bother.
It's so eclectic, a lot of it is handmade, a lot of it does not follow any rigid rule, and I think it creates actually surprise, and it creates things that wouldn't necessarily be expected.
Yeah, I'm looking at that La Cerise, Les
Yeah.
and then the Pharmacie du Conseil, and with that one seems like the Arabic kind of matches it a little better, and maybe La Cerise kind of does too. I'm unsure, but they're all. What's the hippia? Is that just like a graffiti or something, or what?
It is, yeah, it's just a graffiti on actually a boat. And hippia, it just says actually a woman hippie. And I thought it was actually kind of funny and cool.
Wow. And then the other one on the door, is that also graffiti, or is it indicating? It looks maybe a little more official. On the
This
top.
one,
Yeah.
it's Salon الحلاقة للنساء. It's actually the door for a hairdresser.
Okay.
And it's
So it is more official. Yeah.
Yes, and it's in an old Medina, which is an old city in Morocco. I believe it's in Fez, actually.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just, again, like, I'm sure this was done by someone who has no notion of design, and yet it works, and it's actually kind of funky. I just love it. Maybe I'm biased because I grew up with this, you know.
Okay. Wow. Let's see. Did you have one more of these slides? Oh, I want. What is that?
I think I have
100%. What's
one
the
more.
product there? That's 100% bio.
Oh, these are these are natural products that are sold in markets. So that's what this is. Let's see. I have this one. Really, really love the theater Shahrazad on the left. Also philately. Also just like from this little 32 that is in Hammam in Morocco. Hammam is a public bath. So people actually go to the hammam, have like a bucket of water. Everybody has a bucket of water, and they're numbered to know which one has which. Really love the tirage de plan, also with the combination of Arabic. And I think this one, I'm sure there was a designer behind it, you know. And I think that's what I love the most, is how all these languages coexist together, and how people who have no design skills can design, and people with design skills also design, and it's all there.
Well, it's like you said, the bilingual aspect of it, like with the tirage de plan, and then with the philatélie, that one, the Latin and the Arabic seem to match, like the kufik, right? It's like kufik on the philatélie. They seem like they chose a style that kind of would complement those sans serif, you know, that grotesque, quite well. And then some of the other ones, maybe not so much. And is that what is that building that looks like it's got a giant mural on it?
It's actually
Letterform mural.
It's in Casablanca, and it really is beautiful. It was done when there are part of series of like type walks or like culture walks that happen in Casablanca, and I think this was done a few years ago to promote these kind of efforts. So it's abstract and playful. It's not necessarily legible here. It's more type as form.
It kind of reminds me of that really cool, really unusual bloopy example from the, what was it, from the 18th century or 1800s? I forgot which one, the one that was really outstanding, that informed that the later specimen that looked more like woven.
Oh, you're talking about Kandusi and Malika Agzneh.
Yes, yeah. Kind of just in the bloopiness of it, it reminds me of that a little bit, even though it's
yeah, you could say that for sure.
But that was more free form and flowing. This seems more like standardized,
calculated. Yes.
Yeah. All right, if we don't have any more questions, we should probably wrap it up. Thank you so much. I'm glad we got to revisit these cool building paintings and graffiti and etc. and stickers. Those were great. Oh my God. I'm going to be terrified next time I have to go to the dentist. All right. Round of applause, everybody, for our speaker, Dina Benbrahim. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, today. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Grendel. Thank you so much, Skilla. I really love being here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome.